Everybody keeps asking the wrong question about Dawn Staley. They keep saying, how does she keep producing elite guards? No, that's not the real story anymore. The real story is why WNBA scouts are suddenly obsessed with guards who come out of South Carolina looking like they've already played 3 pro seasons before draft night. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Some league insiders believe Dawn Staley is quietly changing the entire WNBA guard blueprint. Not with talent, but with offensive freedom. Think about it. Most college stars walk into the WNBA completely shocked. The spacing is faster. The reads are harder. Coaches don't care about your college reputation. You either create under pressure, or you disappear. But look at the Gamecock guards lately. They don't panic. They don't freeze. And they definitely don't play scared. Why? Because at South Carolina, guards aren't being trained like system players anymore. They're being trained like decision makers. That's the difference scouts are whispering about behind closed doors. And here's the unexpected twist. Some evaluators actually think certain Gamecock guards look more comfortable in pro-style spacing than they do in college games. That should scare the rest of women's college basketball, because this isn't just recruiting anymore. This is WNBA conditioning before the WNBA. Notice how elite guards keep choosing Dawn Staley even when they could average 25 points somewhere else. That's not accidental. Players are starting to believe sacrificing stats at South Carolina might actually make them richer, more draft-ready, and more trusted at the next level. And honestly, that mindset shift could become the biggest power move in women's basketball over the next 5 years. Not social media fame, not transfer portals. Development. Real WNBA development. And the scary part? I don't think the rest of college basketball realizes what Dawn Staley is building yet. See, this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable for the rest of college basketball, because what Dawn Staley is doing right now does not look normal anymore. And if you've been paying attention to the WNBA over the last 2 seasons, you can actually see the shift happening in real time. Coaches are no longer just looking for scorers. They are hunting for guards who can survive chaos, guards who can read defenses in 2 seconds, guards who understand spacing without being told every single movement from the sideline. And somehow, South Carolina keeps producing exactly that type of player over and over again. But here's the detail nobody on television is really explaining correctly. The Gamecocks are not built around one superstar dominating the ball for 40 minutes. That's what makes this so dangerous. Most elite recruits grow up wanting freedom to take 30 shots, build highlights, and become social media stars before they even enter the draft. At South Carolina, it's almost the opposite. Players sacrifice touches. They sacrifice headlines. Sometimes they even sacrifice statistics. Yet WNBA scouts keep showing up anyway. Why? Because scouts are starting to trust the South Carolina system more than the box scores. That is a massive shift. And honestly, some people around women's basketball are quietly comparing this to what certain NBA executives used to say about San Antonio Spurs players years ago. Not flashy, not always the leading scorer, but when they reached the professional level, they already understood timing, rotations, spacing, defensive communication, and pressure basketball. That is exactly the reputation South Carolina players are starting to build around the league right now. And let's be real for a second. There are plenty of college guards putting up bigger offensive numbers than some Gamecock players. Everybody sees that. But WNBA front offices are asking a different question behind closed doors. They are asking, can this player think the game professionally? That changes everything. Because talent alone is not saving players anymore once they reach the league. The WNBA is becoming faster, smarter, and far more brutal mentally than casual fans realize. Defenders recover quicker. Coaches expose weak decision-making immediately. One bad read can send a rookie straight to the bench. And this is where Dawn Staley's system becomes terrifying for everybody else. Her guards are already learning how to process pressure before they ever enter the draft. That's why elite guards keep committing there. Not because it guarantees 25 points per game. Because it may guarantee survival at the next level. And there's another layer to this nobody wants to say publicly. Some top recruits are beginning to believe that struggling a little at South Carolina might actually help their professional image more than dominating at smaller programs. Think about how crazy that sounds for a second. Imagine choosing development over fame in an era completely controlled by attention, nil deals, and highlight culture. Yet that is exactly what appears to be happening. You can even hear it during interviews now. Players talk less about personal stats and more about being pro-ready. That wording matters. That language comes from somewhere. And many insiders believe Dawn Staley has created an environment where players start thinking like professionals long before they become professionals. That is not normal in college basketball. Most programs still recruit with promises. South Carolina recruits with proof. And WNBA teams are noticing it. Actually, they might be valuing it more than ever now because the league itself is changing. Teams no longer have patience for long rookie development projects. The pressure to win immediately is too high. Television ratings are rising. Attention around the league is exploding. Expectations are becoming bigger every season. Coaches want players they can trust quickly. And trust is becoming one of the most valuable currencies in women's basketball. That's why this conversation is bigger than just Dawn Staley producing talented guards. This is about whether South Carolina has quietly become the closest thing women's basketball has to a professional pipeline system. And if that's true, then the rest of college basketball may already be playing catch-up without realizing it yet. And the wildest part about all of this? Dawn Staley is doing it while most of the basketball world is still focused on the wrong things. Everybody is obsessed with scoring averages, viral clips, nil numbers, and social media followings. Meanwhile, South Carolina keeps building guards who understand how to control a game without needing 20 shots to prove they belong. That is a completely different level of basketball intelligence. Because here's what a lot of fans do not realize about the modern WNBA. The league is evolving away from highlight basketball and moving toward decision basketball. Every possession matters more now. Defensive schemes are more advanced. Spacing is tighter. Coaches demand discipline instantly. And if a rookie guard cannot make quick reads under pressure, she becomes a target immediately. That is why certain college stars look unstoppable in March, then completely disappear once they reach the professional level. The game changes. But South Carolina guards seem unusually prepared for that adjustment. And league insiders have started noticing a pattern. These players enter the WNBA already comfortable playing without the ball, already comfortable defending multiple positions, already comfortable sacrificing personal numbers for winning basketball. That sounds simple when people say it on television, but in reality, that mentality is extremely difficult to teach young stars who have spent their entire lives being the number one option. Dawn Staley somehow gets elite recruits to buy into that sacrifice before they even step on campus. That may honestly be her greatest skill. Not recruiting talent, reprogramming talent. Because think about how rare this is in modern sports. Most top players today are taught to build personal brands first. Everything revolves around visibility. More shots, more points, more attention. Yet at South Carolina, players willingly enter a system where the spotlight is shared, roles constantly change, and no individual is guaranteed superstar treatment. And somehow, the WNBA seems to trust those players more because of it. That should tell you everything. There are even scouts who privately believe South Carolina practices might be harder mentally than certain professional training environments. Not because of punishment, because of accountability. Every possession matters. Defensive mistakes matter. Shot selection matters. Communication matters. You can actually see it when Gamecock guards enter high-pressure moments. Their body language rarely changes. They look composed when everybody else starts rushing. That is trained behavior. And honestly, this is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable for rival programs. Because if elite high school guards fully start believing South Carolina gives them the best pathway to long-term WNBA success, then recruiting battles across women's basketball could completely change. Suddenly, averaging 30 points somewhere else may not feel as valuable anymore if professional teams trust the Gamecock development system more. That is the real threat. Not just championships, influence. And the timing of all this is almost perfect for Dawn Staley. Women's basketball is exploding right now. Television ratings are climbing. Arena crowds are growing. The WNBA has more attention than ever before. Which means front offices are under even more pressure to draft players who are mentally ready from day one. Teams do not want long development experiments anymore. They want guards who understand professional basketball immediately. That is exactly the type of player South Carolina keeps producing. And there is another detail people keep overlooking. Watch how often former Gamecock players talk during games. Seriously, watch the communication, the pointing, the directing, the defensive organization. Those are professional habits. That comes from structure. That comes from preparation. That comes from spending years in an environment where details are treated seriously every single day. That's why this conversation is bigger than one coach having a successful program. This may actually be the beginning of a new standard in women's college basketball, a system where WNBA readiness becomes more important than college stardom, a system where development becomes more valuable than statistics. And if that mindset truly spreads across the sport, then Dawn Staley may end up influencing the future of women's basketball far beyond wins and championships. Because right now, it looks like she is quietly teaching elite guards how to think like professionals before the rest of the basketball world even realizes the game has already changed. And maybe that is the most dangerous thing about Dawn Staley's program right now. It does not feel temporary. This does not look like one great recruiting class catching fire for a season or two. It looks organized. It looks intentional. Almost like South Carolina already understands where women's basketball is heading before everybody else fully catches up to it. Because if you really study the evolution of the WNBA lately, one thing becomes obvious very quickly. Teams are no longer building around one-dimensional guards. The league has become too advanced for that. You cannot survive anymore just being a scorer. You cannot survive only playing offense. Coaches want complete guards now. Thinkers, communicators, players who can adjust instantly without needing plays called every possession. And honestly, that is exactly the type of athlete Dawn Staley seems obsessed with developing. Notice how South Carolina guards rarely look overwhelmed in huge moments. National championship pressure, packed arenas, defensive battles, fourth-quarter possessions with everything collapsing around them. Most young guards panic in those situations because they are used to controlling the game through pure talent. But Gamecock guards often look patient instead of rushed. That patience matters more in professional basketball than fans realize. Because in the WNBA, defenders are too smart to fall for predictable moves over and over again. Coaches study every weakness. Teams attack hesitation immediately. If a guard cannot think clearly under pressure, opponents expose it fast. And this is where South Carolina players appear unusually advanced entering the league. Not just physically, mentally. That is the word scouts keep circling around. Mental processing. The ability to recognize actions before they fully happen. The ability to rotate defensively without confusion. The ability to make the correct pass instead of the flashy pass. These are small details casual viewers barely notice during games, but WNBA organizations notice every single one of them. And there is something else happening quietly behind the scenes that people are starting to whisper about more often. Some evaluators believe South Carolina players are becoming easier to coach at the professional level because they already understand accountability. Think about how important that is for a league where roster spots are limited and patience is short. Coaches do not have years to slowly teach professional habits anymore. They need players who arrive prepared emotionally, mentally, and tactically. That is becoming a massive advantage for Dawn Staley's players. And this is where the story takes another unexpected turn. The very thing some critics used against South Carolina for years may actually be helping them now. People used to complain that too many talented players in the program sacrificed individual statistics. Too many stars sharing touches. Too many games where nobody scored 30 points. But what if that environment was secretly preparing them for the exact reality of the WNBA the entire time? Because professional basketball is not built around college-style freedom. It is built around adaptation. And adaptation is exactly what South Carolina players are learning every day. One night, you may be the scorer. The next night, you may need to defend the opposing star for 40 minutes. The next night, your biggest responsibility may simply be making the right read under pressure. That flexibility is gold at the professional level. And honestly, rival programs should probably be worried about what happens next. Because once elite high school guards fully understand this pattern, recruiting may become even more difficult against South Carolina. Imagine being a top prospect choosing between massive individual numbers somewhere else, or entering a system that WNBA teams increasingly trust as a professional preparation factory. That changes decision-making completely, especially for players thinking long-term. And the scariest part? Dawn Staley's influence may not even stop with her own players. Other college programs are already paying attention. You can see it in the way coaches talk now. More conversations about versatility, more conversations about defensive IQ, more conversations about preparing athletes for professional spacing and pace, instead of simply dominating weaker opponents. That shift did not happen accidentally. Women's basketball is evolving fast, and South Carolina appears to be standing directly at the center of that evolution. Which brings us back to the original question everybody keeps asking. Why do elite guards keep looking at Dawn Staley? Maybe the answer has nothing to do with fame. Maybe it has nothing to do with championships either. Maybe elite guards are looking at South Carolina because they believe that is where they transform from talented college players into professional basketball minds. And that might explain the strangest thing happening around South Carolina right now, the fear factor. Not just fear from opposing teams on the court, fear from rival coaches during recruiting battles. Because deep down, many of them know they are no longer competing against a normal college program. They are competing against a system that has started building professional credibility stronger than some actual professional development environments. That is rare. And honestly, it changes the psychology of everything. Because once a program earns the reputation of WNBA ready, every elite guard in America starts paying attention differently. Suddenly, recruits are not only asking, "Can I become famous here?" They are asking, "Can I survive professionally after college?" That is a completely different conversation. And the answer players keep hearing from league circles is becoming impossible to ignore. South Carolina prepares guards differently. Not softer, not easier, differently. That difference shows up the moment former Gamecock players enter training camps. Coaches constantly talk about how quickly they understand assignments, how quickly they adjust defensively, how rarely they look rattled under pressure. Those details sound boring to casual fans, but inside professional basketball, those traits are everything. Because talent gets players drafted, trust keeps them in the league, and this is where Dawn Staley may be changing the game more than anybody realizes. She is producing players coaches trust early. That is huge. Especially in a league as competitive as the WNBA, where roster spots disappear fast and rookie mistakes can bury careers before they truly begin. Teams do not have endless patience. Veterans are fighting for minutes. Coaches are trying to win immediately. So when a rookie arrives already understanding defensive rotations, spacing concepts, timing, and communication, that player instantly becomes more valuable, even without superstar statistics. And maybe that is the biggest misunderstanding surrounding South Carolina players. People still evaluate them using traditional college basketball logic. How many points did she average? Was she the main option? Did she dominate offensively every night? But WNBA evaluators are studying entirely different things now. Can she make fast reads? Can she defend multiple actions? Can she handle physical pressure without losing composure? Can teammates trust her during difficult possessions? Those are professional questions, and South Carolina players keep answering them correctly. What makes this even more fascinating is that Dawn Staley herself seems completely comfortable letting her players sacrifice individual attention if it strengthens their long-term future. That is unusual in modern sports culture. Most programs market stars aggressively because attention brings headlines, recruits, and money. But South Carolina's culture almost feels immune to that pressure sometimes. The focus stays on development, on preparation, on discipline. And honestly, that mentality may age better than almost anything else in women's basketball. Because trends change fast. Highlight culture changes fast. Social media attention changes fast. But players who understand the game deeply, those players last. That is why some insiders believe Dawn Staley's real legacy may not even be championships when people look back years from now. It may be the professional standard she helped normalize in women's college basketball. Think about the ripple effect already starting. More college programs emphasizing versatility. More guards learning to play without dominating the ball constantly. More conversations about pro readiness instead of pure scoring numbers. That influence spreads quietly at first. Then suddenly everybody realizes the sport has changed. And maybe the clearest proof of all this is how elite guards continue choosing competition over comfort at South Carolina. That says everything. Because top players usually chase situations where they can control everything immediately. More freedom, more shots, bigger numbers. But South Carolina keeps attracting athletes willing to enter pressure, accountability, and shared responsibility. Why? Because somewhere along the way, players started believing something bigger. That temporary sacrifice inside Dawn Staley's system may actually create longer professional success outside of it. That belief is powerful. And honestly, if the rest of women's basketball is not careful, this could become the future recruiting model for every major program in the country. Not promising stars unlimited freedom, promising them transformation. Because right now, South Carolina does not just look like a championship contender anymore. It looks like a place where elite guards are learning how to think, react, communicate, and survive at the highest level of basketball before they ever officially arrive there. And if that continues, then what Dawn Staley is building may end up being far bigger than a dynasty. It may become the blueprint everybody else spends the next decade trying to copy. And maybe that is the real reason everybody keeps watching Dawn Staley right now. Not just because she wins, not just because South Carolina keeps sending players to the WNBA, but because something bigger feels like it is happening right in front of us. A shift, a new standard, a new way elite guards are being prepared for professional basketball. And honestly, the rest of women's basketball may not fully understand how serious this is yet. Because if players continue believing that development matters more than empty statistics, if WNBA teams continue trusting South Carolina guards faster than everyone else, then this is no longer just a successful college program. This becomes the blueprint. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Dawn Staley has built the ultimate WNBA guard factory? Or do you believe offensive freedom at other programs still matters more for elite players? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this conversation is only getting bigger. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay locked in. Because the next wave of women's basketball changes might already be happening before most people notice.